Most people imagine the wealthy as flashy icons of consumption. But actual wealth is usually hiding in plain sight, parked in ordinary driveways, living behind modest lawns, moving through quiet neighborhoods nobody photographs. You've been sold the lie that a six-figure salary is the finish line for security, but income is not the finished product. Income is raw material. A janitor who understands the physics of money can die with millions. A doctor driving a leased BMW can be one interruption away from panic. Your spending habits, not your salary, decide which one you become. So today, we are not doing inspiration. We are doing a forensic audit. We are going to run your life through one cold equation and find out whether you are building wealth or merely performing it. I want you to hear this clearly. This is not a video about becoming rich-looking. This is a video about discovering whether your financial life has any structural integrity at all. Because a surprising number of people with expensive lives are financially made of cardboard. They have prestige without reserves, income without insulation, aesthetic without architecture. And when pressure hits, the illusion collapses. That is where we begin. Financial illusion. Financial illusion is the condition in which your lifestyle appears successful, but your balance sheet is weak, stressed, and dangerously fragile. It is the gap between how prosperous you look and how little freedom you actually own. It is the reason someone can earn more in a year than most households and still feel hunted every single month. It is the reason a luxury watch can sit on the wrist of a man who cannot survive 90 days without direct deposit. You've been trained to confuse salary with wealth because salary is easy to display. Net worth is not. Salary can be announced. Wealth usually stays silent. Salary buys a temporary image. Wealth buys time, bargaining power, and options. Salary impresses strangers. Wealth removes strangers from your decision-making process entirely. And that confusion creates the first major fallacy you must dismantle by age 40. The income versus net worth fallacy. There are two broad types of high earners in this world. The first are prodigious accumulators of wealth. The second are under-accumulators of wealth. One group converts income into ownership. The other converts income into evidence of temporary success. One group keeps acquiring productive capital. The other group keeps upgrading visible consumption. The difference is not usually intelligence. It is not usually education. It is not even usually income. It is behavior, discipline, identity, architecture. Let me put it in the bluntest possible way. A high income can fund wealth, but it can also fund delusion. That is why the famous cautionary examples hit so hard. The janitor with the plain car and the thick brokerage account. The small business owner with old furniture and no financial drama. And on the other side, the six-figure professional with the polished image, giant mortgage, luxury lease, private school pressure, country club obligations, and no accessible liquidity. One of the cleanest examples is the Chicago doctor earning roughly $380,000 a year who, when a financial emergency hit, struggled to locate $5,000 in cash without disruption. Understand the significance of that. This is not poverty in the traditional sense. This is income abundance coexisting with wealth scarcity. This is a household producing enormous cash flow and somehow remaining structurally weak. That is not a math problem. That is an identity problem disguised as a money problem. The market sees a doctor. The bank sees a strong borrower. The neighborhood sees success. But the balance sheet sees exposure. That is the audit. And if that example irritates you, good. It should. Because irritation is what happens when a narrative starts losing blood. Now here is the equation. This is the forensic equation. The cold instrument. The one formula that strips away lifestyle theater and asks whether your financial machine is actually building wealth. Age multiplied by pre-tax annual household income, divided by 10. That number is your expected net worth benchmark. Not your dream life, not your social media profile, not your car payment comfort zone, your benchmark. If your net worth is roughly on that line, you are ordinary for your age and income. If your net worth is double that number, you are a prodigious accumulator of wealth. If your net worth is half that number or less, you are an under-accumulator of wealth. And before you argue with the formula, understand what it is measuring. It is not measuring your potential. It is measuring conversion efficiency. How much of your economic energy survives the consumption machine and hardens into owned capital? Let's make it real. If you are 40 years old and your household pre-tax income is $200,000, your benchmark is $800,000. 40 times 200,000 is 8 million. Divide by 10. 800,000. If your net worth is 1.6 million or more, you are operating in prodigious territory. If your net worth is 400,000 or less, you are in under-accumulator territory. And some of you just felt your stomach drop. Good. That drop is not shame. That drop is clarity. Because the formula does not care how exhausting your job is. It does not care how advanced your degree is. It does not care that everyone around you spends the same way. It does not care that your car has ventilated seats. It asks a single brutal question. After all these years of effort, what do you actually own? Because ownership is where financial life changes category. Ownership means there is a part of your life no longer requiring permission from your next paycheck. Ownership means some portion of your existence is financed by yesterday's discipline rather than tomorrow's labor. That is what under-accumulators miss. They think the point of income is to validate an identity. They think more earnings authorize more lifestyle. They think increased compensation means upgraded consumption is now deserved. But the accumulator sees income differently. The accumulator sees income as raw concrete, not decoration, not applause. Concrete. Something you pour into foundations before anyone sees the building. This is why the system works against you. And yes, there is a system. An antagonistic one. Because modern consumer culture is not neutral. It is built to convert your insecurity into recurring payments. It studies your status anxieties. It monetizes comparison. It packages fragility as aspiration and sells it back to you at 12% interest. And the most expensive part of that system is this. Looking wealthy is a tax. A stupid tax. A recurring tax. A socially rewarded tax. A tax on insecurity, impatience, and imitation. Every time you buy something mainly to signal rank, you are paying the looking wealthy tax. Every time you upgrade the car before the balance sheet can afford the image, you are paying it. Every time you buy the house that dominates your cash flow just to occupy the right zip code, you are paying it. Every time you confuse admiration with security, you are paying it. Let's talk about the poverty premium of luxury. A luxury car is not just a purchase price. It is an ecosystem of downstream costs. Higher insurance. Higher registration. Higher maintenance. Faster depreciation in dollar terms. A larger required income to comfortably sustain it. A psychological dependency on preserving the image it projects. And if it is financed, you are now paying interest on a declining asset whose primary output is not cash flow, but impression. That is not wealth. That is an expensive costume. And homes can become the same trap. I'm not telling you a home cannot build equity. It can. But a high-maintenance, prestige-driven home can also become a massive capital sink. Bigger footprint, bigger taxes, bigger repairs, bigger furnishing expectations, bigger utility bills, bigger landscaping, bigger social pressure. The house you thought would symbolize arrival starts extracting tribute from you every month like a private monarchy. If it ties up your cash, constrains your investing, and generates no productive income, then part of your wealth has been turned into a display object. That is the poverty premium. Not because the item makes you poor overnight, because it quietly taxes your ability to accumulate. Because every dollar trapped supporting an image is a dollar not buying freedom. This is where the psychology gets dark, because financial destruction rarely begins with one catastrophic decision. It begins with a sequence of socially normalized upgrades that feel harmless in isolation. This is the Diderot effect. A philosopher receives a beautiful scarlet robe. Suddenly, the old surroundings look unworthy. The furniture looks cheap. The room looks inconsistent. The identity must be updated to match the robe. One upgrade demands another. Then another. Then another. The new item does not end spending. It recruits more spending. That is how lifestyle inflation really works. Not as one giant indulgence, as a chain reaction. You buy the luxury apartment and suddenly your old couch looks embarrassing. You buy the car and suddenly the old wardrobe feels out of alignment. You join the premium gym and now you need the premium clothes, premium supplements, premium routines, premium social circles. You buy the expensive kitchen and now you need the table worthy of the kitchen, the lighting worthy of the table, the dishes worthy of the lighting, the holidays worthy of the dishes. This is not consumption. This is set design, and the set is never finished. That is why consumer life feels like running on a treadmill lubricated with envy. Every upgrade creates a new baseline. Every baseline generates a new inadequacy. Every inadequacy invites another purchase. The pressure is relentlessly one-directional, upward, outward, visible. And if you don't interrupt that chain, the equation will expose you. Now let's go deeper. Because there is an older, more dangerous version of the same mistake. The Fouquet trap. Nicolas Fouquet was one of the most powerful men in France. Rich, brilliant, spectacularly visible. He built a world-class estate and staged a lavish display so grand it was meant to demonstrate his magnificence. Instead, it triggered suspicion, resentment, and catastrophe. He confused visible splendor with durable security. He screamed wealth in a world where visibility invited danger. That error still exists. People assume that if they can display abundance, they have achieved safety. But financial capital and total security are not the same thing. You can have money and still have no margin. You can have assets and still have no peace. You can have status and still be strategically exposed. The man who screams his wealth becomes a target for prices, expectations, requests, imitation, envy, litigation, theft, bad partnerships, and self-deception. The louder your image, the more the world begins billing that image. That is why stealth is underrated. Looking poor, or at least looking harder to read, is a competitive advantage. When people think you have endless capacity to spend, negotiation moves against you. Contractors quote upward. Sellers anchor higher. Social circles assume compliance. Family systems begin drafting claims on your future earnings. Even your own mind changes. You stop asking what something is worth and start asking whether it is consistent with the character you now feel obligated to play. But if you are harder to classify, you preserve strategic ambiguity. You preserve identity protection. You preserve room to say no. And you preserve one of the greatest financial weapons ever invented: low visible expectations. The quiet accumulator understands this instinctively. That is why the real wealthy are often hiding in anticlimactic packaging. They drive ordinary vehicles. They wear stable uniforms. They do not convert every win into a public event. They understand that invisibility protects both wallet and mind. Consider the car data. The median price paid for the most recent vehicle purchased by a millionaire was just over $31,000. Meanwhile, the average new car payment for ordinary Americans broke through $700 a month. Think about how insane that contrast is. The culture teaches the middle class to finance ego at a monthly rate that quietly mauls their investing capacity, while many actual millionaires are buying transportation with the emotional intensity of someone shopping for a washing machine. That is not because they lack taste. It is because they understand opportunity cost at a visceral level. Every recurring payment is a permanent employee in your budget. And a $700 employee is expensive. $700 a month is $8,400 a year. Over 10 years, before investment growth, that is $84,000 sent into a machine whose value declines while demanding additional fuel, maintenance, and insurance. Add compound growth to what that money could have become, and now you are no longer talking about a car. You are talking about an amputated portfolio. This is what I mean by the physics of the accumulator. The accumulator does not merely save money. The accumulator preserves capital from low-yield identity expenses and redirects it toward compounding engines. The accumulator asks a different set of questions. Not, can I afford the payment? But, What does this payment prevent? Not, does this make me look successful? But, does this strengthen my architecture? Not, will people be impressed? But, will future me become harder to intimidate? That is the shift from financial illusion to architectural discipline. Architectural discipline means you stop treating money as a mood regulator and start treating it as structural material. You begin building in layers. Liquidity first, then margin, then invested capital, then productive optionality, then freedom. This is where many people resist, because discipline sounds boring to the undisciplined. But discipline is only boring when you have not yet understood what it buys. Discipline buys sleep. Discipline buys negotiation power. Discipline buys the ability to walk away from bad jobs, bad clients, bad cities, bad relationships, bad timing, bad markets, and bad luck. Discipline is not aesthetic deprivation. Discipline is strategic insulation. And by age 40, you should be old enough to understand this. The point is not to look upgraded. The point is to become uncornered. So what does architectural discipline look like in practice? It looks like keeping your fixed costs lower than your peers with similar incomes, even when your ego says you've outgrown restraint. It looks like building emergency liquidity before buying more symbols. It looks like refusing lifestyle inflation every time income rises. It looks like automating investments so your future is paid before your vanity gets a vote. It looks like measuring purchases against years of financial freedom, not moments of emotional reward. It looks like understanding that a modest life with a strong balance sheet is not small. It is fortified. It looks like separating assets that work from objects that merely glow. And most of all, it looks like identity reconstruction. Because the real war is not against math. It is against the self-image that keeps sabotaging math. If your identity is built around being the successful one, the stylish one, the visibly elevated one, then your spending will keep trying to purchase reassurance. But if your identity becomes builder, allocator, architect, accumulator, then spending begins to answer to a higher authority. The authority of structure, the authority of mission, the authority of freedom. You stop asking, what do people at my level buy? And you start asking, what would a capital allocator do here? That one question can save decades. A capital allocator does not just see the object, they see the invisible alternatives. The index fund not funded, the debt not erased, the runway not extended, the pressure not reduced, the freedom not purchased. This is why wealth is not what you buy. Wealth is accumulating choices. Choices not yet spent. Choices stored as liquidity. Choices compounding as equity. Choices embedded in businesses, stocks, land, skills, and systems that can produce value without requiring your physical presence every hour of the day. That is the final reframe. Most people spend the first half of adulthood converting time into money, and the second half wondering why money never converted into freedom. The answer is simple. Labor alone rarely liberates. Labor must be translated into capital. Capital must then be protected, compounded, and deployed. If you stop at income, you remain dependent on continued performance. If you build capital, you begin shifting from survival by effort to stability by ownership. That is the real exam before 40. Not whether you have a nicer kitchen than your classmates. Not whether your children wear the right logos. Not whether your vacation content looks expensive. Whether your capital can outwork a growing share of your labor. Whether your life is becoming less brittle. Whether your equation shows evidence of architecture. So here is the cold audit one last time. Take your age. Multiply it by your pre-tax annual household income. Divide by 10. That is your benchmark. Now compare it to your actual net worth. No excuses, no costume, no narrative, just structure. If you are below the line, this is not your funeral. It is your diagnosis. Good. Diagnoses can save lives. If you are at the line, good. You have a foundation. Strengthen it. If you are above the line, even better. But do not become arrogant. The same culture that failed to trap you once will keep trying. Because the world profits when you confuse consumption with progress. But you do not have to keep participating. You can become difficult to manipulate. You can become difficult to pressure. You can become difficult to impress, which is one of the highest forms of financial maturity. You can build a life that does not need applause to feel legitimate. And when you do, something strange happens. You stop envying visible wealth because you can finally recognize invisible power, cash reserves, low fixed costs, unforced choices, owned assets, time sovereignty. That is what the flashy life can never guarantee. So if you needed permission to stop performing prosperity, here it is. Cancel the theater. Fire the imaginary audience. End the subscription to appearances. Run the equation. Tell the truth. Then build like an architect. Because by age 40, the game is no longer about income alone. It is about conversion. It is about insulation. It is about whether your life is a fragile facade or a load-bearing structure. And the beautiful part is this. You do not need to become louder to become wealthier. You need to become harder, calmer, less visible, more deliberate, and much more difficult for consumer culture to predict. You do not need a richer image. You need a stronger system. Not richer looking, richer rooted, not admired, armored, not expensive, enduring. Calculate your score and hit subscribe if you're a PAW.